Hey, fight fans, special guest on the line. He's not a regular no more, but he came back home today.
What happened? What happened? I mean, did I get binned off? Did I become too big?
I think it's that. I think he became too big, and
oh, good. We'll go with that one. Yeah.
But it's good to have you back. So much to touch on, Eddie. Mr. Eddie Hearn, folks. Hearn Unleashed. I'm assuming, and I want to jump right into this, Eddie. After Chris Eubank's performance this past weekend, were you right on the horn? Did you get right on the phone with Conor Benn? What was your first reaction after that win?
Yeah, I mean, look, Conor was there, so no one expected it. And, I think we got to give props. I know Liam Smith wasn't fit and he was injured in the fight, but still, you have to give massive props to Eubank. His career was on the line. I think victory was unexpected, but it was also welcomed. I text Callum before the fight and said, please win or lose well. And the win makes the fight one of the biggest in boxing, but particularly one of the biggest in British boxing. I mean, there's some people likening the size of it to Fury AJ. I don't think it's quite as big as that, but it's not far behind. And, we got meetings in London today to talk about that fight. I think both guys have options, but the reality is that is the fight for both. And it's now become a massive British fight.
Eddie, after the loss to Liam Smith, a lot of people felt like, the fight will be big, but it lost a lot of steam. Have we forgotten about that? Was this win good enough for that fight to be back where it was before the loss?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I can't even remember that fight. It's only just where you mentioned it that it's even come back into mind. But, a victory does a lot of things. It rights the wrong of that fight. And again, the fight was always big, but a defeat on Saturday would have certainly dampened the size a little. But victory from Eubank, puts him right on a crest of a wave. Conor's ready to return. Like I said, we're in meetings today to talk about maybe even a fight on that Orlando show on September the 23rd, which would, don't forget he's been out of the ring now for over a year and a half. So, we're talking about him going back into a really big, tough fight at 160, which he'll do. But obviously his training team would probably prefer him to get a little run out first. So we're working on that option too.
Now, can you clear things up, Eddie, about what Conor Benn is allowed to do? Where is he allowed to fight? When and where? There's a lot of confusion out there, and I'll give you an opportunity to clear that up.
Sure. I mean, look, firstly, obviously, he went through the WBC hearing. He was reinstated into the rankings. A lot of people said, we want you to go through the UKAD process and the British Boxing Board of Control process. He was provisionally suspended by them. So he went through that process. He had a hearing. He won the hearing, and his suspension was lifted, was cleared, meaning that he can now apply for his license in England, and where he's currently licensed, which is in America, he is cleared to fight because he's no longer suspended. The British Boxing Board of Control, who lost the case, chose to appeal the case. But at the moment, he is not suspended and cleared to fight. He can apply to fight in the UK, but certainly he's cleared to fight in America. And we'll see what happens with that appeal. Everyone's very confident it'll be exactly the same decision. So right now, we're in conversations with the British Boxing Board of Control about fighting in the UK on September 30th. And, they've made it pretty clear to us they don't have any objections to him fighting internationally, because ultimately he's had his suspension lifted, and they won't, appeal that him fighting in another jurisdiction, which there's been talks of before. So at the moment, clear to fight and, keen to do so.
But there's still some concern if he applies for his license, the fact that the British board has appealed, that there'll be some resistance there to get his license in England.
And that perhaps, I mean, we wouldn't, I think because of the timing of a September fight, it wouldn't necessarily be to apply for a license. It would be what is called permission to box. So if you look at people like, I don't know, Tyson Fury, who has a license with Nevada, every time he fights in the UK, he asks for permission to box. He doesn't ask for a license. So it's quite complicated. But like I said, at the moment, the board have made it clear to us that previously they weren't happy with him to fight internationally because he was suspended provisionally. Now he's had that suspension lifted. He's cleared to fight, subject to the appeal, which they may or may not go through with. But that's the situation at the moment, and would be allowed to and cleared to box, certainly in Orlando, on the 23rd of September.
And obviously that fight, I mean, I can't see it taking place anywhere else but in the UK, right? I'm talking about Conor Ben Eubank Jr. I mean,
we've already had 2 approaches in the last 24 hours from site deals that want to bring that fight to their country.
Right.
We want to do the fight in the UK. Like, I don't want to start taking a massive all British fight to international territories. Obviously, if the money's there, the fighters are going to want to have that conversation. But at the same time, would love to do the fight in the UK.
Right. But in other words, Saudi Arabia might be interested in that as well.
Other places, there's a lot of places want to bring big fights at the moment. And like I said, that one of the biggest in boxing, certainly one of the biggest British fights.
Well, yeah, definitely would hope to see that fight soon. Now, I got to ask you about Eubank Jr.'s post-fight interview. It was very interesting to me, Eddie. I feel, knowing Bo Mack and his team, I'm spending some time around Crawford, I built a great relationship with those guys, and they're great trainers, great coaches, and they give great instructions. We saw it with Spence Crawford. We saw it in this Eubank Jr. Liam Smith fight. And when asked, about the new team, he couldn't give a straight answer. He talked about percentages. Everything is a percentage. I mean, it was just so odd to me. I felt like it was a perfect. The fact that he didn't bring it up on his own was a little strange to me. But he was given the question, so it's easy for him to say yes. We put together a great game plan. Blah blah blah. I mean, give credit to the team. Why do you think that he couldn't straight up just give credit?
Don't start trying to understand Chris Eubank Jr. or anything to do with a Eubank. They're a unique breed. I don't think Chris is one for breaking down the thank yous during a victory speech. But you have to. I mean, firstly on the scales, he looked totally different. Totally different. Obviously. The game plan was spot on. I think everything they did was spot on in that fight. So you always have to give props to your team, just maybe not his style.
Right. Yeah. Well, moving on. I want to talk about Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois. Obviously, it's been the talk of the town about the low blow. Can you give me your honest opinion, Eddie, about that?
Yeah, honestly, sometimes people will think that I give an opinion because he's not my fighter. And look, being straight up, obviously, if it is your fighter, you have to back and try and spin a slightly different narrative. The reality is the punch landed below the shorts, right? So therefore, the protector sits. If you look at his shorts, his protector sits the same level as his shorts. Now, unless the referee wants to bring those guys together and say, his shorts are so high, too high. So therefore, a shot here is legal. But anything that punches the protector is not a legal shot. I mean, if you look at the bottom of Dubois' hands, it's like 8 inches below the short line. I mean, we all know.
Yeah, we had Jack Reese on. We had a referee that was very neutral in the situation, and he didn't want to flat out say whether the shot was low or not, but he did give us the rules. And the any punch above the pelvic bone and up, no, not the navel, from the pelvic bone. So his shorts, his protector was above the navel. So he in other words, he gave us his opinion without giving it to us, and he said the shot was legal and not low. But it's subjective, and that's why I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly never heard a rule of above the pelvic bone. I've only ever heard below the navel, and at the end of the day, it's the referee's job to make sure that the shorts are on the navel. You can only assume it was on the navel, his shorts, because the referee never said differently. But there's many different angles at the punch. If you look at how the punch landed, ultimately, the bottom of the fist was a few inches away from Alexander's genitals, and it hit him and the protector. I think don't get me wrong. I mean, a couple of inches higher, I think you get away with it. You're talking about reasonably small margins. Right. But if the bulk of the hand hits the protector, I don't see how it's a legal blow. But, you know, at the end of the day, we all know Usyk don't particularly like it to the body. Right. And, you know, there was a lot of other incidents that happened during that fight and about people's performances. But obviously everyone focuses on that now. Yeah. But I think the right decision, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why instant replay needs to be implemented in all commissions, because I think that will help out that issue a lot. All right, let's talk the big boys. AJ Wilder. People are saying that fight is done already, or pretty much done. There's not too many hoops you have to jump through. So is that the case? I mean, are we going to be announcing that fight possibly?
Yeah, you know, it's slow. It's slow. I won't lie. You know, obviously it's a massive fight and these things take time. But, you know, again, in London today, there's meetings about that fight. Everything's kind of agreed other than signing of the paperwork. We know that takes time, especially in that part of the world. For me, my biggest concern is AJ wants to fight in December or January. We know the Wilder fight's not going to happen in December, so we're happy to wait till January. But if that fight starts being pushed back to February or March, don't be surprised to see AJ still sign for that fight, but have another one in between. He's loving the activity at the moment. You know, he's loving being in training camp. He's loving working with Derek James. Right. But our full focus is to sign the Deontay Wilder fight, and those talks continue, particularly today here in London.
So you sound a bit disappointed. Like, wait, things are not moving as fast as you expected them to be.
Yeah, I'm not disappointed, but at the same time, we want to get it done. That's what everybody wants. Myself, AJ, 258. Everybody wants to fight Deontay Wilder.
Without getting too technical, Eddie, like what makes it take so long if both parties have agreed on the terms?
A huge amount of money that has to be signed. A huge amount of money that has to be signed off. It's not just as easy as say, I can't believe it. What's the hold up? Just give him the 50, 60 million, whatever it is, and away we go.
What I'm saying is that if the fighters and the site agrees on everything, then you have to go
through a process act. Right. You know, these kind of things, they have to go through a process of approval. You're talking about a huge amount of money, right. You know, and now, don't get me wrong, I think the conversations now will also extend to Usyk and Fury. Right. You know, I think there may be a revisit of both of these fights on the same card. Who knows? So there's a lot of conversations to be had. All I can tell you is, and I truly believe, having spoken to Shelley Finkel and those guys, that Wilder is up for and ready for this fight also. So, you know, from the fighter's point of view, we're in a good place. Let's just tie up the paperwork and the funds and try and get it over the line.
All right. Recently, I spoke to Canelo Alvarez, and unlike, you know, his relationship with Oscar De La Hoya, whom recently there's an interview him saying that Terence Crawford would beat Canelo Alvarez easily at 160. I asked him about your relationship with him, and he said, you know, as far as I know, we're friends still. He congratulated me on the 3-fight deal with PBC. We spoke, and we're still good. Is that safe to say that you and Canelo are still friends?
Listen, I've long been a fan of Canelo Alvarez. You know, before we even represented him, we've had a tremendous run of 5 or 6 fights. We made him hundreds of millions of dollars. He made us a lot of money as well. And I loved working for him. I think we've done a brilliant job. I think he enjoyed his time with us. And I hope, subject to how long he goes on for, that we get the opportunity to do it again. On a personal level, I class him as a friend, classy guy. We talk socially every now and again. But he made the best move for his career. And I think he did make the best move. I didn't have any options for him at all, really. And as close as we are and as friendly as we are, it don't really work like that. So, you know, once that offer got presented to him, I think he made the right decision. And, you know, I'm sure we'll catch up later this year, but I wish him all the best. I hope he beats Charlo. If you're going to ask me about the Terence Crawford
yes, I want you to take on Oscar's response too.
You know, you're talking about 2 of my favorite fighters. You know, you're talking about two modern day greats. I do think Canelo Alvarez is too big for Terence Crawford, as good as Crawford is. I don't think, you know, you will, in my opinion, you will never see Canelo come under 168 in a fight.
Right.
But I don't think he's in the mood to do that. I don't think he wants to do that. He, you know, 168 still a little bit, not tough, but it's enough. So I don't think you see Crawford come up to 168. If he does, I don't see how he beats Canelo Alvarez at 168. So I'm not sure whether that fight happens, but if it does, two great fighters, I favour Canelo Alvarez.
Well, I mean, Crawford did say that he would go up to 168 recently in the Joe Rogan interview. He just wants a couple of big fights left in the sport. Now at 154, does Errol Spence have a shot against Terence Crawford in the rematch?
No, I don't think so. I think that was a taxing fight for Errol Spence. I think, you know, without taking anything away from Terence's performance, I think there are starting to be a few miles on the clock for Errol Spence. Whether it's lifestyle, whether it's retina, whether it's car crash, whether it's tough fight, whatever it is. And that kind of fight last time would do some more to take some extra miles off the tank. So I do think he'd be stronger at 154. He's been at 47 a long time, but I still think Terence Crawford a big favourite in that fight. And it's going to be interesting how that plays out with regards to the rematch calls. You know, I don't think it's a fight that people are clambering for. But Errol's obviously holding his ground now, and it's one of those things that you're going to have to come up with something else for Errol Spence if you want him to get off the pan for that rematch.
I think the storyline is the weight, obviously, at 154. That's the only thing
but I just think I don't see anyone that would pick Errol Spence to beat Terence Crawford at 47-54. It doesn't matter.
I agree with you. Now, speaking of Terence Crawford, I mean, Bomac detained, in the UK for the loaded firearm. I don't know. I don't know any of the laws there as far as firearms. I mean, do you think there's going to be?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. You don't carry one. I mean, but you don't. The last thing you do in our country is carry a gun, especially a loaded one. So I don't know enough about. I've saw the statement from the police, but I feel like we shouldn't really speculate on these things. Other than, did he bring it here? If so, that's worrying in itself. And I think the one thing I'll say, having spent a huge amount of time in America now, it's much different to the UK, especially on things like this. Like, it still baffles me that people walk around with guns in America. And when you have conversations with them or debates with them, they can't believe that I would suggest otherwise. So we come from very different backgrounds in that respect. Obviously, over here, it's very, very serious. I mean, I think you're talking about a minimum of 5 years in prison and a maximum of 10 years. I'm sure he'll have a legal team ready to fight that. But one thing's for sure, it looks like he's going to have to stay either in custody till the hearing on October the 9th, is it? Or if he does get bail, he'll have to remain in the country. And it will certainly affect his travel moving forward, and particularly returning to the country. And that will be a problem for Chris Eubank Jr. moving forward in a fight, because I don't know how that's going to play out, but it ain't great. It's a serious situation over here that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, it's very, very unfortunate. Really quick, last question. We know that Katie, has her hands full, but there are people out there that still longing for that rematch against Amanda Serrano. Has that ship sailed, or is that still a possibility?
No, I mean, look, I think Serrano's going to want all the big fights. She's going to have a lot of mandatories now that are going to start stacking up, but also, she'll definitely be looking at November 25th. Chantel Cameron is a big favourite in that fight in many people's eyes. She won well last time. People think that, she'll win again. If Katie was to lose, I think she can move back down to 35 and rematch Serrano. Takes a little bit of gloss off that fight. If she wins, the Serrano fight's even bigger. But yeah, I think Serrano, will be looking out for that big fight. She's still a player, particularly with both girls. And but Katie's got a lot of work to do in that fight. Chantel Cameron comes full of confidence going into that massive fight.
But is there a rematch clause in that fight? I mean,
no.
Does Chantel have an option? No. Okay.
No.
All right. Well, Eddie, thank you as always. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Good to see you, mate.
Let's make these fights happen, man.
Cheers, mate. Take care.
Cheers.